Thanks for helping me get out of there. No, they only took you because of me. Hey, I got us a real sweet deal here. We do this one job with them, we make some real money, and then we're free. When's the last time you could say that? Been a while for me, too. So what's your name, anyway? Chewbacca? Alright, well, you're gonna need a nickname, because I ain't saying that every time.
Nothing will stand in our way.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
I will finish what you started.
Who are you? I'm no one. There are stories about what happened.
It's true. All of it.
The Force. It's calling to you.
May the Force be with us.
My nerd world.
Just let it in.
Oh, Jabba.
Why does she get a blaster and I don't?
Oh, Jabba.
I really love that piece of music by John Powell from Solo: A Star Wars Story that played in that clip that was released this week in promotion of the digital release and the home Blu-ray DVD release of Solo: A Star Wars Story. I love that bit of music. It's weird too because it's very distinct. It's more Powell, to be honest, than it is Star Wars. Sounds very much like something that he did from How to Train Your Dragon, but I love that moment. And I'm so I keep mentioning this, but I'm dying to watch that movie again. I'm actually surprised at how bad I want to watch Solo: A Star Wars Story. So at least another week until the digital release is out. I'm sure I'll cave and get the digital and also end up getting the Blu-ray. Welcome to episode 138 of the My Nerd World, a Star Wars podcast. I am your host, Jon Justice. I'm really excited, and I mentioned this last week, but I got it confirmed, and I'll have all the details next week. But we will have a new sponsor for the show in Mack Weldon, MackWeldon.com. Go and check out the website, and next week I'll have a promo code to offer you to get some great discounts with Mack Weldon. Really excited to actually get a sponsor on board the show. I've mentioned many times that I do this as a labor of love because I love Star Wars so much and was never about monetary value, but it is really cool and helpful that I get a little bit of assistance in the production costs of the show. So help me out by checking out MackWeldon.com, and then next week again I'll have a promo code for you. And thanks to everybody who has already requested to be on the My Nerd World mailing list. The project that I'm working on continues to move forward. Again, as I mentioned last week, I believe, looking at a holiday release, hoping to have everything available come November. At least that's the schedule and game plan moving forward, and have made a few other people in my life aware of the project because I've kept it kind of hidden apart from those who are directly around me and helping me out with it. But I'm really super excited. And again, if you want to be one of the first to know what the project is and how to get your hands on it or ears, talkshownerd at gmail.com. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later on in the show. Lots of listener feedback, speaking of the email from YouTube and those that have written into talkshownerd at gmail.com. A lot of people commenting on last week's topic of nostalgia. Looking forward to working through those. And what I'm going to do is I had a core commentary and list that I wanted to work through on the show this week, talking about wrapping up this trilogy and what loose ends they could wrap up, right? How could they tie the whole of the saga together in this final film? I'm going to save my list for next week. And I'm going to ask you, between now and then, we can kind of do them all together. I'm curious how many of you end up aligning with what my ideas are of things that they could go and wrap up from episode 1 up until episode 9. So comment on YouTube, drop me an email, talkshownerd@gmail.com. And when it comes to wrapping up this saga, what is it that you would, what would you want tied up? What questions are out there that you want answered? And again, go all the way back to episode 1 and let me know, and we'll get into that. We'll get into that next week. We do have some audio to play here in just a moment. There's a new meet and greet video put out for Star Wars Resistance. I want to talk a little bit about that. The cast of episode 9 is talking, specifically Oscar Isaac and also Domhnall Gleeson have made some comments. We'll talk a little bit about what they had to say. We will get into, just briefly, I'll mention the wrapping up of the saga again, and then we will dive straight into the listener feedback this week. Because like I said, I mean, so many of you wrote in some fantastic moments that you think are potentially going to be nostalgia moments in the future, and the stuff that you look back on as nostalgia for you. But before we get into that, let's go ahead and play this new video. It's 3 minutes long, but it provides a little bit of insight into Star Wars Resistance. There's some interviews that are done within this 3 minutes, and then I'll give a little bit of my impressions, my further impressions of Star Wars Resistance as the promotion for the new Disney animated show gets underway.
Team Fireball, they're our core Star Wars group. They're not caught up in the bigger things going on in the galaxy.
I want it to have a sense of childlike fun and adventure.
And what unifies this team is that they need each other. They need to try and win races to survive and make money. And our hero, Kaz, is still coming into his own, and he's a very, very good pilot. But he's still a bit fish out of water when it comes to living in a place like the Colossus.
Nice job, BB-8. All right, this is what I want you to do.
I'm Christopher Sean, and I play Kazuda Xiono on Star Wars Resistance. Kaz's job, given to him by Poe, is to spy on the First Order. He's good at flying, but he's not really good at spying.
He's a bit clumsy, gets into trouble here and there, but Kaz is definitely a guy who has a lot of heart and wants to make a difference.
In times like this, I think it's best to keep Kaz occupied. I am Scott Lawrence. I play Jarek Yeager.
Yeager kind of represents the old school. Yeager was a pilot for the Rebellion.
Now he's just trying to live his life as mainly a mechanic on this installation in the middle of nowhere.
And he unfortunately keeps getting pulled back into the action.
Yeager, he's the father figure of Team Fireball, and Kaz causes a lot of trouble and a lot of grief for Yeager.
Get ready to be impressed.
You ready to be impressed, Tam?
I'm completely ready. Hi, I'm Susie McGraw, and I play Tam Rivora on Star Wars Resistance.
Tam is a mechanic who works with Yeager. She was a racer back in the day and lost her ship.
This guy better be paying for this rush job, Yeager. She's tough, no nonsense. She kind of has attitude.
She also has a lot of heart and passion. She wants to have a purpose in life.
She's incredibly brave. She cares about people, but she likes to keep her emotions kind of to herself. Kaz, this is Niku.
It is so nice to meet you.
Niku's a bit of an oddball.
You know, I am starting to like having adventures. I find that it raises my heart rate, which is good for my circulatory system.
Hi, I am Josh Brunner, and I play Niku on Star Wars Resistance.
He's a genius. He's very naive, but he's got a huge heart.
He is this unbelievably positive, happy Nikto character. No matter what kind of day you're having, Niku is having a great day.
I once had a pet named Lucky that reminded me of home. And then it died. And then I ate it.
We made the show for a younger audience. I think they'll love the relationships between the characters and all the lightheartedness. It's unique in tone, unique in look. It's a completely different package.
It's very action-packed and vibrant and colorful, and you have lots of different pilots and ships and the different settings. I wish I had a show like this when I was growing up.
I am really excited for this show. I know that it's geared towards kids, and I want to get into a little bit of that. But looking at some more of the footage coming from this particular promo that you just heard the audio from, it really looks interesting. And I do like the idea that while we wait for this other content to be given to us, the live-action TV show, the movies coming up, I mean, it's going to get heavy, right? We don't care. We just want to consume Star Wars. But I like that there will be another, piece of content out there geared towards young people. And look, I firmly believe that Disney and Lucasfilm allow the artists and the storytellers that they hire to make these series, whether it's Clone Wars, whether it's Jon Favreau with the live-action TV show. They bring them the idea, they let them do what they want to do, right? We've seen this. Of course, they'll change directors if they need to. But what I'm driving at is, I do understand the need because Resistance has taken some ridiculous heat online from some Star Wars fans. And the reality is they need to reach that younger audience. And I get that. And while they're given creative freedom in that, I do understand the need for Disney and Lucasfilm to make sure that there is content out there for younger viewers to get introduced to Star Wars so that we can continue to get this Star Wars content. And I think a lot of people lose sight of that. I think a lot of people, when they see a show like Star Wars Resistance, they put their own biases out there. It's not what they want, but it's not geared towards you. I'll be honest, I have not watched all of the Forces of Destiny. I know that makes seem like a shock, being that I'm such a big Star Wars fan, but you know what? It hasn't really appealed to me. I mean, maybe I have, and I just through watching bits and pieces, maybe I've watched more than I realized, but that wasn't content that I was going and seeking out. But I also understand that I'm not the audience for that. So I'm super excited about this show. They're not going to be central to the larger plot, and as Dave Filoni said, this is geared more towards 10-year-olds, a younger audience, and these guys aren't involved in the major conflicts. So I'm personally really excited about the show, and every little bit of new content that they give us gets me even more excited.
There has been an awakening. Have you felt it?
So let's talk about casting. New casting, and also returning cast members who are already talking to the media, as this is about where we're at in the... I mean, we're really early on when it comes to Episode 9 promotion, but this is what we get. This is the early portion of it. We get cast members talking around the fringes in regards to other projects they're doing, but they get asked about Star Wars, and so we get little teeny tiny bits of insight. We did have another bit of casting news, and I don't think we covered it last week on the show. So Dominic Moynihan, we talked about that, or Monahan. Kerry Russell, of course. Naomi Atkins, Richard E. Grant. Also added to the cast in what they're saying is a key role is Doctor Who and Matt Smith. It's really tough to go down the speculation road without knowing who they're playing, right? Because any one of these characters can play dual roles. And mentioned prior, heard this on another podcast, and I thought it was very relevant when you look at, if you're laying out the action figures and you're looking at, bad guys versus good guys, we're a little low on the bad guy side. So I think it's fair to say that Matt Smith would, if I were a betting man, I'd put him on the First Order side of things. But you never know. I had a really interesting side thought, and I don't think there's any way they could squeeze this into 9. Because the amount of the arc that would need to take place in order for this to happen in the movie, I don't think, unless we're looking at a 3-hour movie. But wouldn't it be interesting if there was another Force user on the dark side who convinced Rey to join them, and so she was dealing with her own dark side, light side conflict throughout the movie, and at the end, she chooses the light after going almost all the way to the dark. And again, I don't think that's possible. I was literally out on a ride. I was on a bike ride, and the thought crossed my mind when I was listening to, I think I was listening to Who Talks First. That thought crossed my mind. I go, wouldn't that be interesting? But I just don't know how you flesh that out. And Matt Smith made me think of that, right? Or even Kerry Russell. I mean, wouldn't it be interesting if Kerry Russell were a dark side user and convinced Ray to join her? And it came about, and I remember now that I'm thinking about it, it came about when I was thinking of titles. And will the title of episode 9 be a positive title or a negative title? Meaning, will it be a dark side focused or light side focused? When you look at Revenge of the Sith, you look at Return of the Jedi, which way could you go for episode 9? Return of the Sith, right? I thought that was interesting. But I can't imagine labeling the final movie and all of them with the bad guys in the title. That may sound ridiculous, but at least in my mind, it just doesn't compute. I would think you would want something a little bit more neutral. So I'm excited about the addition of Matt Smith. I remember I was really excited when he was going to be in Terminator Genesis, and then they just completely reduced his role to, I think, a hologram at one point and cut most of it out. I do like that movie, though, quite a bit. All right, so on to the cast that is returning, and they're talking to the media. First, we go to, and just since we're talking about 9 and plot, Oscar Isaac was being interviewed about his new thriller Operation Finale with the USA Today, and this is probably the most significant thing from the article in USA Today that he had to say. In the battle against the evil First Order, Isaac thinks it's easy to forget that the Resistance are guerrilla fighters, adhering closer to something like the Revolutionary War fighters or even the guerrillas in Cuba with Che and Fidel and all those guys living in the mountains, coming down to do some attacks and going back and trying to hide from the empire of the United States. It's that kind of ragged at this point in time. You hear about stories with George Washington as a general where lots of people died based on their orders, Isaac adds, but that is part of leadership and that push and pull in the fighting for figuring out what's the way to move forward. So I actually think there's a lot more there than one may lead on. I mean, I think for you and for me, we read that and we go, wow, he actually said quite a bit. Let me put it this way. I was thinking with a time jump, we could already have a larger, fully formed resistance/rebellion going on in 9, meaning that the call wasn't answered at the end of 8, but by the time we get to 9, it has been. And so perhaps Lando's already there, and we already have Outer Rim planets that are involved in this. This makes it sound like it's closer to Return of the Jedi when you look at scale and the ground forces that went in on Endor, and we'll get to more of that in just a moment. And that maybe the core of this particular film is going to be bringing in the individuals who did not answer the call from 8. That would give a good B plot. I'm sensing we're going to get a lot of echoes from Return of the Jedi. There's some more footage, or I should say photos, leaked photos from some sets that have been leaked, showing a jungle forest-like environment with vines, and some people have been quick to point out that this was looking more like the environment that was going to be utilized more on Takodana that wasn't. Initially that base on Dakar that the Resistance is at, when you watch the movie, when they're inside, you can see the vines coming in from the roof of like it was underground. Well, when you look at the actual film, there's no jungle on top, and it was changed. They just left the vines there. I think we are going to end up, we know we're already going to end up getting some type of jungle forest planet. I really do think it's going to echo a lot of what happened in Return of the Jedi, which leads me to believe there's going to be some sort of mission that needs to be fulfilled. I hope it doesn't revolve around a super weapon. I don't think that it will. But it will most likely be revolving around something First Order related that needs to be taken out while Plot A goes on. And that's where I think the other mirror to Return of the Jedi is most likely going to take place. Plot A will end up involving Rey and Kylo and whoever else is around them. So from a pure speculation standpoint, that makes the most sense. Especially if you're going to look at this movie as, ring theory, if you're going to look at it through, how did Revenge of the Sith add up, and how did your Return of the Jedi add up. The little bit that we know so far seems to be leaning that direction. The other story that we got out of Gizmodo, reading the Star Wars Episode 9 script made Domhnall Gleeson paranoid. Okay, so this is what he had to say. I just think it's funny. He was on the Happy Sad Confused podcast, reflected on his feelings after he read the script, which included mostly dread, not because of anything in the script, but because he was afraid of spoiling it. I made the terrible mistake of reading the script. I know everything, he said. The nightmare is falling asleep on a public transport. The nightmare is you wake up on a plane and someone's dictating. You wake up and your mouth is shaping words. You wake up and you're like, Skywalker did this. And then you realize you didn't know how long you've been speaking. And there's a kid filming and there's somebody writing it down. Because you're in the air, you say, we need to talk before we land. I can access my bank account. So a lot of people are making hay out of the, and you're like, Skywalker did this line. Skywalker is going to do something in the movie. And people, thankfully, in commenting on that particular line, have been quick to point that out. That, yeah, he's just talking about his paranoia of leaking something, and that would be something that would be leaked, that would be a really, really huge deal. I get excited over knowing, the movie's shooting, obviously, so, this is, kind of irrelevant, but I get excited of knowing that somebody's read the whole script. Him saying, I read the script, I know everything. That's just cool to me. Obviously, there's hundreds of people now that know the story of Episode 9, but just when you hear somebody specifically say that, what must that be like? Not that I would want to know. That would be tough. If somebody walked through my office door right now and handed me the script for Episode 9, I don't know that I would be able to resist reading it, even though I probably would really want to. So, I was surprised, though, neither of these clips or neither of these interviews were keeping with the theme of what we talked about before, where so far, I think surprising, isn't that right? They were talking about, it's very surprising. The script is very surprising. Yeah, of course it's going to be. There's going to be all kinds of surprises, right? But that, to me, seems like I love when the narratives form. The Force Awakens being the real sets, practical effects. And then you had, Defying Expectations, which was absolutely true for The Last Jedi. And I fully expect that we'll have, if it's not it's full of surprises. It's going to be I think surprises and wrapping up the saga. I think those are going to be the big ones. He's really tied it all together really well. When they go and say things that don't mean anything, but that we then go and spend 45 minutes talking about on a podcast.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
All right, so as I said earlier, the intent was I was going to give you my list of things that they could wrap up, ways in which J.J. Abrams could tie in the entire saga of all 9 films together. But like I said, what I decided to do was instead, I'll give you my list next week. You give me yours during the week. talkshownerd@gmail.com. You can also leave a comment on YouTube. If you want to, on Twitter, at the My Nerd World is the one on Twitter where you should go and respond. And also I'm on Facebook too, at Jon Justice, Jon. So how do you think, what ways could they? Are there things that you feel they must wrap up? I'm curious. If there's anything you like, you sit back and you go, I want to know that. I want that wrapped up. So your ideas for wrapping up the saga. Things that you need, things that you want, things that you believe they could do. I remember when Revenge of the Sith came out, I was all about the connection. I really wanted the movies to tie together. I mean, this was at a time when we weren't under the impression that we were getting any more Star Wars. I mean, we were told we weren't. We were told that Episode 3 was the last one. And I remember, boy, I really want them to tie this up, and I want them to tie that up. And I was bummed that there wasn't more of that. I wanted to see how Yoda learned to become a Force ghost. And Obi-Wan Kenobi, or had that explained a little more. And I was bummed that it was reduced to just that quick moment on the ship between Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda, where they just mentioned it briefly in passing. I learned how to commune with Qui-Gon. I wanted more there. And I'm not going to lie, it still takes me out of the movie a bit when I watch Return of the Jedi, and there's that conversation between Luke and Leia on Endor, where he asks, did you know your mother? Just images, really, feelings. Happy but sad. Why? And I know that there's been some ancillary material that's done its part to try to explain how Leia could have remembered anything of her mother, considering that Padme died so quickly afterwards. But for me, I would have liked to see that work a little bit more. Because when I watch Return of the Jedi, that does pop into my mind as a fan, and I just go, I wish that had been resolved better. So, how are they going to, what should they, what will they, what could they do to wrap up the saga in Episode 9? Again, talkshownerd@gmail.com, or you can comment on YouTube as well.
Something inside me has always been there. But now it's awake. And I need help.
All right, so let's get into your listener feedback for the week and see how much we can get through in the remaining minutes of the show. First, we go to Christopher. Thank you for providing a sensible alternative viewpoint in regards to Star Wars The Last Jedi. I was once on The Last Jedi rage wagon, and I was thinking I would find similar rage against the movie on your podcast. To my surprise, your love for the film shocked me and prompted me to consider an alternative viewpoint, one that immediately brought me to the point to give The Last Jedi another chance. And while I'm disappointed over the treatment of Luke's character, and frankly I still cannot see blue milk in a positive light again, I think it was green in the film. Be that as it may. I am in wonder over the breadth and the scope of Rian Johnson's artistry as a filmmaker. Turns out my personal rage is my problem, not Lucasfilm's or Rian Johnson's. Question, Kathleen Kennedy, how do you rank her job so far, and what credible rumors have you heard regarding her future? Sincerely, Christopher. Keep me posted on your secret project. I will. First off, on Kathleen Kennedy, I don't buy any of the rumors. If they were going to yank her off any of this stuff, they would have yanked her off already. I think she's doing a fine job. Star Wars is never going to appeal to everyone. So to try to go and make everybody happy in all things is just going to end in failure and misery. Look at the box office numbers, and they've been solid. I still believe that Solo: A Star Wars Story is going to end up, when all is said and done, recouping its money. And I think they learned a lesson, and there were a lot of different factors involved as to why that didn't do better at the box office. So I think she's doing an absolutely fine job. Look, I've said so much about The Last Jedi. I don't want to belabor the point of how much I love that movie. It is a different Star Wars film. But The Empire Strikes Back, for me as a kid, was a different Star Wars film. I mean, it completely defied my expectations and pushed me to think about characters more and the depth of the storyline. And Rian Johnson, I've heard somebody say it this week. They feel like it's a good movie, but not a good Star Wars movie. And again, I think it's a piece of art. And it's, even though all these movies share a timeless quality, because these are set, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, I do believe that Rian Johnson's will stand the test of time even more so than the other Star Wars films. All right, let's go to Brittany. And Brittany, thank you so much for the lengthy email here. We'll go through some of the highlights of your email to me. Isn't it strange how I can be such a big fan of your podcast when I know your least favorite Star Wars film is Return of the Jedi, and that one is my favorite? It's almost as if we can be friendly and respectful of everyone's opinions and likes. Yeah. Well, look, and Return of the Jedi being my least favorite Star Wars movie is like saying that the cheese pizza is my least favorite pizza, because I prefer to have pizza that's got more meat on it, right? I still love that cheese pizza. I'll still eat a lot of it if it's in front of me and enjoy every single bite. All sarcasm aside, my favorite of the films is Return of the Jedi. I started getting into Star Wars during the dark times, early 90s, 10 years old. Before that age, I'm sure the films were on TV, and I remember them periodically. The scene that was the most was the beginning of Return of the Jedi in Jabba's palace. One weekend that I really got into it was when I was flipping channels on TV, and I came across A New Hope, and it was during the trench run. I remember sitting down and thinking, this is like a war. I'm sitting there, and I became mesmerized, engrossed in this sequence so much that I stayed to the very end. When it ended, I was so bummed out until I heard that there were 2 more films. I remember at church that there was this family that loved Star Wars, and they would watch it all the time as a family. As someone from a family of divorce, join the club, I was envious that they did stuff like that together, and it brought them joy. The next week, they handed me their box set of 3 tapes. And she goes into talking about how it just ended up changing her life, the artwork, the detail of the box, buying her own set, the first movie scores that she purchased at Best Buy with a box set, the endless T-shirts and school supplies that she could find. I'm so happy that I found this outlet, because I was feeling very much like an outcast when I got into the films. Funny though enough, getting into the films also caused me to be more of an outcast, being a girl and liking boy things, right? Needless to say, I got a lot better with the re-release of the films in '97, and then the prequels when I was in high school. To answer your question, though, my most fond memories have to be whenever I watched Return of the Jedi. I love Luke jumping, flipping over the Sarlacc pit, and catching the green lightsaber. Yoda and Obi-Wan telling Luke about the truth about Vader, but most importantly, telling him about Leia. I think what it boils down to is that Luke thought he was alone when his aunt and uncle died. Leia was all alone when her planet blew up. When Luke finds out that his father is not only alive, but it's Vader, it's very hard to come to terms with. But then you can see him thinking about things differently when Ben tells him about that Leia is his sister. I think that finding out that information, that conversation with Yoda and Ben verifying the truth of his father and Leia being his sister, it gave him a different family again. Not to say that he didn't make one with his friends, because that is important to understand, that family does not have to be blood. My second favorite moment is when Luke tells Leia about it. The music is one of my favorite pieces, and I tear up every time. Yeah, that music is absolutely fantastic in that moment. She goes on to say that she went to the fan event an AMC had for the Last Jedi and before the film. Yep, they played the featurette of John Williams. All the music was for the new movie, and we saw him conduct the orchestra. I fell completely apart when he started to conduct the Luke and Leia theme. I wasn't upset that it was spoiled for me. I was relieved. Of course, now we know that we will see Carrie in some way, shape, or form in Episode 9. The other 2 scenes that affected me the most is when Vader reads Luke's mind and finds out that he has a sister and uses that to try to push Luke. The last part is the ending when he burns his father's body and the music sad and bittersweet. But then the next time you see Luke, he walks into his sister's arms and then sees Anakin, Yoda, Obi-Wan standing there smiling. Deep sigh. I love this film. Thank you for reading my story. It was so long. Sometimes you can't edit your origin story when it comes to how you become who you are. Thank you very much, Brittany. And I'll tell you what, I really do look forward to going back and watching Return of the Jedi next time, keeping all your thoughts in mind. Again, these are personal films, and we all take different things away from that, and they all have different emotional, moments for each of us for different reasons. Alejandra writes from Venezuela. Thank you so much for the wonderful podcast. Thank you. I listen to every episode every week on my way to the office. You'll be glad to hear my sister is tired of hearing your voice in the car every morning. I'm sorry for your sister, but she also now knows how my wife feels. Anyways, on the subject of nostalgia, I wanted to give my humble opinion. As I was born in Latino America, my Star Wars experience has been a little different. I came to love it recently since it's not a cultural thing here in my country like it might be in others. I watched all the movies in like 3 days right before TFA began shooting. One of the scenes that I believe will be stuck in people's mind in the future is Rey taking the lightsaber at the end of TFA. For sure it has stuck with me. And for The Last Jedi, I believe is Luke's last scene. Such a beautiful scene. And the OFC, Kylo and Rey fighting side by side. Yeah, I know what she was getting at there. I was watching The Last Jedi this weekend, by the way. I love The Last Jedi, don't get me wrong. And for some reason, I still struggle watching Finn's part of the movie. I feel like his character's arc suffered in the editing room, or perhaps Ryan wasn't very clear about Finn's journey, and that came across on screen, at least for me. I don't know. I'd like to know your thoughts on this, since we always talk about the Skywalkers. Maybe we should discuss secondary characters this week. As I said, I'm more of a recent fan, and for that, I'm aware that the other / older fans perhaps dismiss my opinions. Nope, that won't be happening here. But that's a topic for another time. Keep up the great work and keep doing what you love. Thank you, Alejandra. Well, just real quick in regards to Finn. I think the issue that I don't disagree. His story was important for the film. I've grown to appreciate that plot. I guess it would be C plot. I've grown to appreciate that plot more and more when I watched the movie and the way it all comes together. This film, like many, but this one in particular, everything in the film happens for a particular reason, and so you need to have that adventure that Finn and Rose go on. And like I said, I've grown to appreciate it more and more. I love the Canto Bight sequences now, and I love the father chase. In my opinion, the reality of what Rian Johnson needed to do was this story was Kylo and it was Rey's, and he needed them to get through what they needed to get through. That was the core. That was your A plot, the core of the story. So everything else was always going to be secondary, including Finn. And I'm pretty sure that J.J. Abrams, especially since we've already seen some of those leaked shooting pictures from Episode 9, is going to do him a great service in Episode 9. And I'm of the opinion that I thought the Phasma and Finn battle on the Supremacy was fantastic. I know that Alejandro didn't bring it up, but I've heard people complain that neither of those characters were handled well, and I completely disagree. People were complaining that we didn't get Phasma in action in 7. Well, we got her in action in a really good sequence with Finn, with John Boyega, and I thought that they handled all that really well. I love that fight. And look, The Last Jedi is a long movie. I don't know where else you cut to make the movie shorter without cutting into more of Finn and Rose, because there isn't anything of Kylo Ren, Ben Solo, and Rey that, in my opinion, you could go and get rid of. All right, let's go to Teeny243. Loved your latest show, as always. Thank you. I decided to write an email this time because I'd love for you to put me on your mailing list. It's done, regarding your secret soon-to-come project. As for your question, for me, I'm way over 40 years old, and my Star Wars nostalgia only really set in with the prequels. I do get emotional every time Yoda appears on screen, though. TFA had some truly memorable moments, like Ren's murder of his father, but overall, for better or worse, it seemed like something we already knew. The Last Jedi, on the other hand, had so many things that seemed brand new and iconic, and it's hard to even pick one. If I had to decide for only one, though, I'd probably go for the Holdo maneuver. Those few seconds are absolutely incredibly awesome. I've watched the movie a few times in the theater, and every time the audience seemed to hold its collective breath when for a few seconds the sound was absent and then came back with a vengeance. That whole scene, the sound, the visuals, the way the whole subplot led to that moment, that's just perfection. I think most of the problems people have with this scene, that it's so great and impactful, everything else in Star Wars, in my opinion, pales in comparison. That's why people are complaining that it devalued every other heroic moment that came before. Why has it not been weaponized before? And they question how such a moment could be given to such an inconsequential character. Speaking of that moment, I have a question for you. It's really not easy to tell or at all, but to me it always seemed like that the cutting of that scene implies that there's more or less all the dramatic developments culminated all at the same time. The fight over the lightsaber, the execution of Finn and Rose, and the Holdo maneuver. Can it be possible that the fact that two incredibly strong Force users were playing tug-of-war with the lightsaber put so much stress on the Force surrounding them that Holdo's jump into light speed was like the prick of a needle to a balloon? So yes, that maneuver would not have been as devastating as it was, but it happened this way because Ben and Rey had been stressing the Force to the breaking point. I think that's a really interesting theory. I don't know if it's something that would be broken down in a film, but I certainly, when it comes to headcanon, you could say that. They all kind of culminated and happened at the same time at this moment. And that whole sequence of events really doesn't get enough credit. Like, every time I watch the film, there's certain things that I gravitate towards, and it shifts viewing to viewing. And I may have mentioned this last time. I know I tweeted it, but the fight between Luke and Rey after the finger touching scene. Yeah, I know I talked about it, but I'll bring it up again. That little fight in the rain, in the dark, on Octo, that's fantastic. And like, that doesn't ever get the proper credit, in my opinion, that it deserves. That moment is absolutely fantastic. And that whole cutting that leads to that. Like, I will admit that in The Last Jedi, when the fight begins with Ben and Rey and the Praetorian Guards, right? I wish that we didn't have to cut away with the setup of Finn and Rose and what's happening with the Resistance heading off to Crate and all that, right? I want to stick with that scene. Bring me more of that. But you don't get the culmination of what Teenie 243 was talking about and that major, magnificent moment without that. So, and it's not something that takes me out of the film. It's not something that I get upset about. It's just because I love that scene so much with Ben and Rey and Snoke getting killed and spoiler alert, and the Praetorian Guards. It's just I just want to watch that. But you can't get to the really good stuff without going through all the other stuff. And then to cap it all off, you still get the fight with Finn and Phasma going to Crate. I mean, the whole end of that film is fantastic. But back to your original point, I think you make a great point. And I know that, talking about iconic moments, and we'll have to go and do a little bit more next week, but that moment when they're stuck and the Legacy Saber gets destroyed is just absolutely fantastic. All right, thank you so much for checking out the show this week. Again, talkshownerd@gmail.com. If I didn't get to your email this week, I'm looking at them right now. We will get to it on next week's show. Mac Weldon, MacWeldon.com, will be joining us as a sponsor of the show. Looking forward to giving you the ability to take advantage of some amazing deals on some amazing clothing. If you've never heard of Mac Weldon before or aren't familiar with him, we'll talk all about it on next week's show and give you that special promo code. Spreaker, Stitcher, Podbean, YouTube, iTunes. Did I miss any of them? I think I got them all. And again, coming this holiday season, an all-original multimedia project by yours truly that I'm still in the middle of working on, but really, really excited to be able to share with you very soon, and more details will be forthcoming. Hopefully in the next few weeks, we'll be able to unveil a little bit more about what the project is all about. But if you want to be one of the first ones to know, again, email me, talkshownerd@gmail.com. Until next week, I hope you have a fantastic week. And why don't you go ahead and go watch some Star Wars?
The Force will be with you, always.
My nerd world.